He left the keys on the table and said I could keep them until I paid him back. The sentence comes out small but hard, the kind of sentence that presses into the skin and does not let go. The air in the little bakery smelled like burnt sugar and lemon rinds, steam from the oven fogging the window and a thin pearl of humidity. Her hands were sticky with glaze, a smear of cinnamon still under one thumbnail, and the radio crackled with a song she used to dance to with him. She is Mara, a former co-owner who turned her kitchen table into a brand after a betrayal that took the business name and the storefront. Now she sells from a folding cart and an online account under a new name, trying to gather a deposit for a real shop and to rebuild trust with her teenage daughter. Across the street, a man who used to be their partner laughs openly and calls the small cart an embarrassment. Mara meets his laugh with a measured smile, wiping flour off her apron, and then looks straight to the camera like she has nothing left to lose. Today, you will watch how a broken trust becomes the unlikely engine of a new kind of success, and how the people who counted her out end up watching her open doors they could not imagine. Stay with us, because what happens next is not what anyone expected. The cart bell rings, and the sound is thin and bright, the same sound that once meant customers and now means dozens coins. The metal of the cart is cool despite the sun, the canvas awning smelling faintly of wet cloth from last night's rain. A passerby keeps their head down, the scrape of shoes against concrete, a rhythm that measures moments of courage. Mara says, "I know it looks small, but these are my recipes." The man across the street, Connor, says, "You don't have a brand, you have leftovers," and his voice is a public verdict. Mara answers, "I have hands and I have a daughter to feed." And in that sentence, the stakes are as concrete as the worn receipt book in her pocket. Pilar, a neighbor with a battered phone, stands with a camera in one hand and a soft, steady look in her eyes. You will see how a short recording, a few heated words, and a community that keeps noticing can turn a moment of humiliation into a first step towards something much larger. Mara grew up in a house where baking was a way to say, "I love you." Her mother taught her to fold batter with patience, not speed, to listen to the oven, and to never open the door for a full 10 minutes because the cake needed to finish learning to rise. At 19, she left for the city, carrying little more than a suitcase and her mother's flour-stained recipe card. She opened a tiny storefront with Alex, who promised investment and showed her bank statements that looked numerically honest. Those first years were a blur of early mornings, a cracked display case fixed with tape, and the sound of customers saying, "Thank you, this is exactly what I needed." When the lease ended, Alex kept the name, the social accounts, and the small business loan that had been in both their names. He moved into a new place and sent a message that read, "I did what I had to do." Mara was left with recipes, a cart, a promise to her daughter, and the kind of hurt that rearranges daily life. When the betrayal is described aloud months later, there is a physical hush in her voice. She tells the story in 3 short sentences and a long pause. She says, "He took the store and left me the debt." And the pause is where the hurt lives. She remembers the stacking of bills on the kitchen table, the smell of cheap coffee at 2 in the morning, the way her daughter's homework got quieter when they could not afford new pencils. Despite the loss, she taught herself to translate pain into a plan and to write every small sale down like a ledger of survival. Her backstory is not a single wound. It is a series of decisions, early mornings, a mother who showed her how to press dough, a daughter who learned to eat quietly so the neighbors would not hear, and a long apprenticeship in resilience. These paragraphs of memory are the base from which the rest of the story grows. The scene moves into the home where family tension is immediate and private. Inside the narrow living room, the television hums a low blue light and the scent of simmering tomato fills the air. Her daughter, Amara, fiddles with a pencil that has no eraser, the sound of graphite scratching paper like a tiny clock. Connor shows up in the doorway knowing precisely the effect of his posture, the way he puts his hands in his pockets and leans back like a judge. He says,
"You should have been better at business." Mara says, "I built it with my hands and with sweat." Amara says, "Why did you leave us?" Connor says, "I made hard choices so you could live better," and his words are sharp. The argument escalates into a sequence of short lines, each one loaded. Marcus, a neighbor who once worked nights at the deli, steps in as a witness and says, "You cannot treat people like debts to be cashed." Connor retorts, "This is how the world works," and the sentence lands like a verdict. The exchange continues, each line a small cut. Elena, who runs the dry cleaner, shouts from the hallway, "Hey, keep it down," and that ordinary complaint becomes a part of the intimate publicness of their fight. Rosa, a woman who once bought bread every morning from Mara, stands there with her arms crossed. She says, "I will not let her go under." The family argument is both private and communal, and in those voices the viewer watches trust dismantle and the seed of a new resolve appear. Moment of Tension 1 begins here, with a private confrontation that becomes public and humiliating. The first paragraph shows Mara's voice breaking when she asks for help, her hands clenching a crumpled invoice as if it were a talisman. The second paragraph shows Connor's cold, clipped reply, and the way that a woman who had once laughed with him now feels small in front of neighbors. Each sentence in this section stretches to hold the discomfort of being judged by people who used to be customers. The paragraphs move the story forward to a place where the audience understands that the stakes are not just financial. They are about dignity and the right to a future. The two paragraphs together total the weight of that tension and prepare for the next step. After that break, Mara tries institutions, and most doors close. The bank meeting is a scene of formality and quiet refusals. Mara sets the file on the counter, and the banker, an older woman named Priya, taps glasses with a pen like the eyes of a practical jury. The smell in the bank is paper and sanitizer, the quiet interrupted by the soft click of a keyboard. Mara explains the situation, and the banker says, "Your personal account does not meet the collateral requirements," and she reads the policies like law. The exchange is polite and brutal. Jamal, who works at the local credit union and knows community names, tries to help but says, "We cannot override the scoring system." Technical description of the loan process follows in an accessible way. Loan approvals depend on credit history, documented income, and collateral evaluation. Lenders model repayment risk with scoring algorithms and require signatures and proof of steady revenue before releasing funds. The paragraph explains what paperwork mattered and why a folder of receipts and the sincere word of neighbors often do not translate into accepted collateral. Refusing to accept final no as an answer, Mara gathers ideas. In a small room lit by a single bulb, she writes plans on the back of pizza boxes, each line a practical step. She sits with Marcus, Elena, and Rosa, and they speak rapidly, ideas thrown like seeds into a hopeful field. Marcus says, "We can turn your cart into a brand, and I'll handle deliveries." Elena offers to let Mara use a corner of her shop for pop-ups. Rosa says, "I will buy from you every week and bring my friends." Mara says, "If we get an online presence, we can start accepting pre-orders and build a cash flow." They sketch a strategy that mixes street sales with short videos, local influencers, and a small fundraising goal. The sensory details here include the scratch of a marker on cardboard, the dust motes in the bulb's light, the taste of cheap coffee sweetened with hope, and the feeling of a plan folding into place like dough that rises slowly. The plan becomes action. Mara records short clips in her kitchen while Amara arranges cupcakes like small, cheerful vases. The camera lens fogs a little with steam, the background noise a kettle singing. In the clips, she looks directly at the viewer and says, "These are my recipes, made from home, and I will not let the past define my work." The first recording is raw. The second tries a softer light. The third adds a quick caption about community-backed pre-orders. Nina, a local teacher, shares the video with her group and it spreads. At first, the comments are cruel. Someone writes, "She should have been smart," and another person says, "Why beg in public?" Connor watches the posts and posts a mocking comment. The backlash is immediate, and it stings. Mara answers comments in short, measured lines. Thank you for the feedback, and she does not retaliate. Then a small wave of support begins. Carlos, a barista, posts a photo of the products and writes, "Best cupcakes in town, order here." Pilar posts a shaky live stream where she interviews Mara for 2 minutes and ends saying, "She deserves this." The turnover from ridicule to traction is rapid and unexpected. The social media moment is a pivot. There are heated exchanges in the comment sections between cynical strangers and ardent defenders. The scene has dialogue exchanges where Mara replies to skeptics with composed sentences, where Pilar defends her on camera, where Marcus posts reorder confirmations, and where a micro-influencer named Ben messages to propose a collab. The scene includes 6 exchanges of direct speech that escalate, then calm. Sensory moments pile up. The sound of notification pings, the smell of coffee from a grateful buyer, the texture of printed labels that now sit ready for orders, and the taste of a cupcake sold out in minutes. This is where a simple video leads to a first large order and a brand new rhythm. Technical description of setting up online sales for a small food business. Registering a business page requires verifying identity and agreeing to platform policies, uploading clear product photos, setting shipping or pickup options, and connecting a payment processor that complies with local tax reporting. Most platforms require bank account confirmation and sometimes an additional verification step for food-related products. This explanation clarifies why the first week involved many small, tedious confirmations. Momentum brings an unexpected opportunity. A local catering manager named Sophia reaches out after tasting a sample at a Sunday market. Sophia says, "We have a contract coming up and we need reliable bakers. Would you consider us for a test run?" Mara answers, "Yes, we can do it," and her voice holds the mix of fear and determination that comes before a leap. Negotiation takes place in a noisy cafe where the smell of espresso and lemon tarts masks the tension. They sign a short service agreement with payment terms, a pilot order for 1,000 mini tarts, and a trial deadline. The moment of signing is symbolic and also practical. Jamal witnesses the exchange and nods approvingly. The sense of a formal contract gives Mara breathing space. There is a technical paragraph to explain the contract structure. A service agreement for catering outlines deliverables, timelines, payment schedule, liability clauses, and cancellation policies. It typically requires signatures from both parties and may include a small deposit to secure dates. Clarity on these points reduces disputes and secures cash flow for production costs. Success arrives, but not without new conflict. The catering event runs into a logistical problem when a delivery van breaks down on the morning of a wedding. The small team scrambles. Amara rides in the passenger seat of a borrowed car with a box of pastries on her lap. The paper edges damp with condensation, the fragrance of butter cutting through the car's interior. Marcus drives while speaking in short sentences. "Keep breathing, we will make it." And the exchange between him and Mara is rapid, 6 lines in quick succession as instructions and reassurances. At the venue, a guest accuses them of being late, and Connor appears unexpectedly in the crowd, smiling like someone who had predicted this failure. The atmosphere tightens into the highest tension of the story. The staff from the catering company look at their watches. In 2 compact paragraphs, the crisis plays out. Will the order be salvaged, or will this be a public failure that proves Mara not ready? The paragraphs total the necessary tension and push the narrative to a rescue. Rescue arrives through community improvisation. Marcus borrows a van from a church group. Rosa and Elena help set up the table. And Ben streams a frantic live update that draws a crowd to the courtyard. A last-minute reorganization means the desserts arrive as the bride walks in. The catering manager, Sophia, hugs Mara and says, "You saved the day." And the sentence carries new weight because most people there had come to judge and instead became witnesses. The client signs a larger contract on the spot and offers a monthly slot. That night, the small team counts receipts under the same single bulb where they had first sketched a plan. They laugh and the sound is relieved and raw. Lists of names accumulate in the margins of receipts like a map of those who stood with them. Marcus, Elena, Rosa, Jamal, Priya, Carlos, Nina, Ben. A medical type of tension is not literal here, but another high-stakes moment comes when Mara considers a legal fight over the original storefront name. She sits with an attorney named Priya who explains the basics, and the description that follows clarifies process in simple terms. Trademark disputes begin with evidence of prior use, registration,
Status, and public recognition. A formal claim requires documentation of continuous use in commerce, dated receipts, photos, and witness statements. If the matter escalates to a court or administrative board, both sides submit affidavits, and a ruling considers harm and confusion in the marketplace. Mara decides not to pursue a costly legal battle, and instead to build a new brand that stands on its own. Growth after that point is tangible and measured. Within months, Mara rents a small storefront that used to be a seamstress shop and converts it into a bright kitchen with pegboard and jars of ingredients labeled by hand. She hires 2 local people part-time and starts a weekly community baking class led by Rosa. The narrative lists accomplishments with specificity: first-month revenue numbers, repeat customer percentages, and a 5-year contract with a regional supplier. The tone here is celebratory, but not triumphalist. Names keep appearing as a way of honoring the network that made these steps possible. There is dialogue of planning meetings where Marcus says, "We should hire someone for mornings," and Amara replies, "I will help with social posts." And these exchanges are steady signs of a life rearranging towards stability. Moment of tension 2 appears when a sudden equipment failure threatens the shop's cash flow. 2 paragraphs describe the panic and the practical actions: calling suppliers, an emergency loan considered, and a community fundraiser organized overnight. The paragraphs total the compact pressure of not having enough to replace a key oven element and the way a small community responds. The outcome is a makeshift repair that buys time, a modest loan from Jamal at the credit union, and a group purchase that reduces cost. The scene includes 500 to 600 characters and resolves with a sense of communal rescue. Transformation is not only about profits. Mara's work creates jobs for neighbors who are underemployed. She starts a micro-scholarship fund at the local school in Amara's name, and the storefront becomes a quiet meeting place. Quarterly numbers are shared openly in a short scene with the team and include concrete figures: monthly gross revenue up to 3 times the cart income within 6 months, 5 regular wholesale accounts, and an increase in staff hours from 0 to 80 a week. Names are listed as part of the success ledger: Sophia, Marcus, Elena, Rosa, Jamal, Priya, Carlos, Nina, Ben. The shop hosts a fundraising bake sale that funds a medical bill for a neighbor, and the camera records the high fives and the shared slicing of a celebratory cake. The epilogue unfolds in 3 time-stamped moments that show how the change holds and evolves. 1 month later, Mara stands behind a counter that still smells of citrus and yeast. She has a new receipt book and a small bank deposit slip that feels heavy in her pocket. The storefront is modest but clean. The window decal reads Mara's Kitchen, and beneath it a smaller line that says Baked with Community. She notes small practical wins. The catering contract delivered a consistent monthly check that covered the equipment repairs and allowed the first hire. Amara re-enrolled in an after-school program and smiles more during homework time. The shop has a rotating board of support volunteers and 5 weekly wholesale clients. Local press runs a short piece, and the comments thread is overwhelmingly positive. Mara writes thank you notes by hand to the first dozen supporters, the ink drying slowly, the gesture a reminder that gratitude and growth can move together. 3 months later, the books show a pattern. Repeat customers are up, the social accounts have reached a regional audience, and an accountant named Carlos helps them file their first simplified tax return. The smell of pastry now greets more regular faces, and the team has grown to 4 employees with predictable schedules. Mara has negotiated a small merchant line with the credit union to smooth cash flow between larger orders and shop expenses, and she is learning to read balance sheets with a patient, exacting curiosity.
The community scholarship has one beneficiary, and the shop hosts a monthly open mic night that draws neighbors and customers. The tone is steady and practical, and Mara says in an interview, "I am not where I want to be, but I can see the road." And that sentence has a pulled, taut hope behind it. 6 months later, the picture is different in scale, though not in humility. The shop is renovated to include a small teaching counter and a second oven. Mara has a 2-year contract with a local cafe chain for weekend pastry supply, and her monthly gross revenue has climbed to a point where she can pay health insurance for her employees. The betrayal that once defined the opening of the story is now a footnote in a long ledger of work. Amara performs at the local school's talent night and talks into a microphone about growing up watching her mother turn loss into a living. The names that helped keep them afloat are now part of an ongoing community calendar, where meetings and events list volunteers by name. Mara has started mentoring other women who lost businesses and offers 1 pro bono consulting hour per week. The final paragraph of the epilogue shows a scene of celebration with cake and coffee, paper plates and earnest toasts, and a promise that this success will be shared. Near the end, there is a CTA for comments positioned when the viewer is most connected. If your chest feels tight after watching the part where neighbors rallied, we feel that too. Have you seen someone fight for a second chance and win, or at least keep trying against the odds? Tell us a story. Start your comment with "My hero was," and tell one short memory about someone who worked with quiet dignity. Your comment helps choose new stories and can encourage someone reading
to take the small first step they need. This community reads and reacts, and sometimes those comments lead to help in the real world. We read them aloud on camera, and sometimes we send small support to families mentioned. Now, let's return to how a single contract turned into a chain of small changes. The closing scenes return to a quiet and honest documentation of what success requires. There is a short segment with numbers and receipts laid out on a table, the camera close on signatures and a deposit slip, then a set of interviews where each supporter gives a line about why they helped. Marcus says, "I saw sweat, and I knew I could do something." Elena says, "She fed me when my shop was empty." Rosa says, "She saved me a place at her table." Jamal says, "Community credit matters." Priya says, "Legal battles are expensive." Carlos says, "Books do not scare me." Ben says, "A good story is worth sharing." The scene ends with Mara reflecting, "I never wanted to be famous. I wanted to be honest." She looks at Amara and says, "We did it together." If this story moved you and you want to see more people who are rebuilding lives through honest work, subscribe and join the community that supports real change. Your subscription helps us find and verify stories, organize small funds, and amplify people who might otherwise remain unseen. Share this with someone who needs to know that recovery is messy and often communal. After months of counting and recounting the small victories, Mara writes a letter to the woman who once was her partner and leaves it in the mailbox of the old storefront. She writes, "I forgave you, not because you asked, but because I could not carry that weight anymore." It is not a triumphant message, but the most practical statement of freedom she can offer. The last shot is of Mara locking the shop for the night, a key that she owns in her hand, and of Amara waving at the window. It is a simple image that contains loss, repair, community, and work. If you want to help, tell a story in the comments and share this with someone who needs to see that dignity built from small acts becomes a future for many. Because in the end, the thing that changed everything was not revenge. It was work, it was neighbors, and it was a choice to begin again.